Okay, doing a new thing. Question of the month. How is this still single? Go.
Engage.
Alright, today I'm doing episode 17, When the Bough Breaks. This episode is about the Enterprise discovering this planet that has basically been an Atlantis of the galaxy. No one knows if it actually exists or where it is exactly. It's just supposed to be this super powerful, complex society that's been hiding itself for thousands of years and basically just, staying out of everything. So they follow this trail of breadcrumbs, which are like these energy signatures, to this area in space, and all of a sudden this planet Aldea appears out of nowhere and says that they want to talk to people from the Federation. And it quickly becomes clear that these people cannot have children, they're sterile, and they want some human children. So when Riker refuses and he offers them help to figure out their problem that says we can't give you our children, they immediately kidnap about 6 children from the Enterprise, and the episode is about the Enterprise and Captain Picard trying to get them back. And in the end, they end up figuring out what's wrong with the Aldeans, which was a problem with their something called, they have radiation poisoning from the sun and the cosmic rays because their ozone layer has been depleted. So Beverly Crusher figure out a way to fix them and they give the children back. So this episode I've honestly been kind of avoiding. I haven't been avoiding it, I've been putting it off. Because I remember really disliking it, just as kind of like a boring episode. I remembered it being very Wesley-centric. And going back and watching it, it wasn't as bad as I remembered. It definitely didn't focus on Wesley or portray him as a boy hero as much as I'd built it up to in my memory. But it certainly wasn't a very interesting episode. I don't know, I kind of have peace about this episode because they could have done a lot more with it. It's actually an interesting idea. I feel like it's been used before, a different civilization wants to steal their children, they says they can't, and it kind of opens the way for philosophical discussions about how much we love our children, which they didn't focus it a lot on that, but that's basically what the episode was. It was the Aldeans trying to understand the humans' attachment to their children and trying to figure out why they won't give them up so easily. And it turns out in the episode that Wesley is exposed to their computer device that they rely on for everything. And it turns out that, they've lost all of their abilities for science and medicine because they've just been relying on this device. And in the end, they decide to shut it down because it has been what has been causing the hole in the ozone layer. And they're going to go back to, the way they were, and they have to relearn everything. Which is really I feel like it's very like original series plot. I feel like a lot of times it happened in the original series that, oh, there's a computer behind it all. Oh my god, we relied too much on technology and it has really hampered our evolution, or it's hindered our way of living, and now we have to go back to the way things before technology. And I feel like that's a very rehashed plot, and it plays a major part in When the Bough Breaks, and that bothers me because it's not really original at all. Something else that bothers me about this episode is that they really could have done some great stuff here, because Wesley is one of the children who gets kidnapped, and when he's like 15 or so, he's the oldest one. The other kids are 12, all the way down to maybe 6 or 5. And he has the oldest one, he's kind of their leader. And he actually does have some decent scenes where he's trying to get all the children together. He's trying to negotiate with the people who have them. No one really pays any attention to him, but he is definitely putting in an effort, and he's actually being mature about it. And I thought that was good for him, but during the negotiations, it's Dr. Crusher and Picard who are negotiating for the children's release. And while it points out and it says that Dr. Crusher is upset that her son has been taken, and it says that Picard is upset that all these children have been taken, it doesn't actually show it a lot. And especially since even from the first season, they're trying to play Picard as a father figure to Wesley, and as a potential romantic interest of Dr. Crusher, or at the very least a very good friend of Beverly. I feel like they could have done a lot more with the dynamics there, but it doesn't really show Picard being any more concerned about Wesley than any of the other kids. It doesn't show him showing any concerns for Beverly. Beverly herself is not that upset about Wesley being taken. She's really calm about the whole thing, which, is good, but it's still like she doesn't really seem that upset about it. And I feel like they could have gone into that a lot more. I feel like that was a missed opportunity because I don't like it when they go into that specific relationship a whole lot, because I feel like that's something that they focus on. But since the plot of the episode is Wesley and other children being kidnapped, they could have definitely played off of that a lot more. I'm trying not to turn this into a big critique. I know, like I make a big deal about the stuff I don't like, but I feel like the episode could have been so much better because it's a decent idea. It's not groundbreaking or anything, but like they could have explored it a lot. And I feel like it really could have been a good episode if they just focused on some of the characters a little bit more, because really you don't get a good feel for any of the characters. There's no big character development in this. But one thing that I realized that I do with Star Trek, I hold it to a very high standard, and so on one hand, I don't want the episodes to be boring. I don't want them to be contrived or trite or have really old, reused plot lines. I want them to be something new, and I want them to show a lot of character development and a lot of, not really philosophical, but they put a lot of thought into this plot, and they've done all they could with it. But on the other hand, something that I feel like I fault Star Trek with occasionally is that they sway too much to the philosophical side of stuff. They not just delve into moral issues, they latch onto them and they don't let go until they beat you over the head with it a number of times. And they don't always do that, obviously. There are really good Star Trek episodes that walk that fine line between being kind of boring and old and being incredibly philosophical and just too deep. And I think that's something that Star Trek does really well, both the original series and Next Generation. But I feel like this episode, they didn't try anything new. And they didn't have to go into huge philosophical meanings of why do we love our children, because obviously, as Picard said, that's a fundamental instinct of the human race. We love our kids. Obviously, they don't need to explore that. But they could have explored some other things, like why the Aldeans don't feel that attachment. They can't have kids anymore, but it hasn't been that long. There's only less than a generation has gone by, obviously, since they couldn't have children. So they should understand that deep attachment. So you could explore, like, why don't they feel that? Why don't they realize that just because they have superior technology, that doesn't mean that the Enterprise is going to give up and go away? And they could have done a lot more with it. But I'm really expounding on that point a lot. So I'm going to go on to something else. I don't know, like, it's a weird episode because, the main characters aren't in this episode a whole lot. It's kind of strange because they introduce this cast of maybe 5 new children, and then they focus on them, and they focus on their interactions with the Aldeans, because at one point the Enterprise gets hurled away into space 3 days away at the show of the Aldeans' power, and then they take 3 days coming back. So in that time, the kids are kind of bonding with their Aldean adoptive family / captors. And it's kind of interesting because, Star Trek doesn't introduce brand new characters a whole lot. I mean, like each episode they do have like the new kind of cast of people that the Enterprise is interacting with. But in this one, it was actually new people from the Enterprise that we're seeing interact with aliens. And even though they're kids, we still don't see that a lot. We normally stick to like maybe the 8 main characters on the bridge. And it's kind of cool because, they have these random kids, but, at least we're kind of getting a different feel of, what happens on the Enterprise and how people on the Enterprise who aren't senior officers act, because we kind of get to see the kids' parents. And that's something that I find cool, not from a viewpoint in that it expands the show or that it expands like the main characters of the show, but it kind of expands the Star Trek universe first. And I feel like everyone who loves Star Trek has wondered what it would be like to live on the Enterprise. And seeing the everyday lives of these common crewmen and their children, it really gives you a look into that. It's kind of like if you guys have seen the episode Lower Decks. It's about 4 like ensigns and lieutenants on the Enterprise who we've never seen before, and about their interactions. And I think it's one of the best Star Trek episodes, just because we get to see what life is like on the Enterprise when you're not the first officer, you're not the chief medical officer, you're not chief of security, you're just a dude, you're an ensign in your little tiny quarters sharing with someone else trying to get ahead in the Starfleet. And seeing the kids and their parents, like, I thought that was kind of interesting. Like, I like it whenever they branch out a little bit. That's all I have to say about this episode. I've been trying to think of something that I really liked about it or really hated about it, or just something that I found interesting or a development that it made. I can't really think of anything because, it's one of those episodes that's just kind of there. It wasn't awful. It wasn't nearly as awful as I thought it would be. But it wasn't it doesn't stand out at all. One thing I feel like I do need to say is that I tend to give Wesley a bad rap. I feel like most people do. When I think back on episodes that have focused heavily on Wesley, I tend to kind of discredit in my mind, such as this one. Going back, it wasn't that bad. It was alright. Wesley's part in it was definitely better than I thought it was. But I, I don't even know. I don't know what else to say. If you have any thoughts on this, let me know, because I would love to hear from people who saw more depth in the episode than I saw, or found something interesting in the episode that I've missed. So, anyway, hope you enjoyed this.